those theories range from names that are so radioactive that if you even mention them, you're immediately labeled a anti-Semite. So that's would be the Rothschilds. So it sounds like two very large corporations fighting. Okay. Both of them have about 20 to 30% ownership by, yes, BlackRock. Oh, it's BlackRock suing BlackRock.
It looks pretty evil. I mean, to stare into the abyss and kind of see, who.
And the abyss stares back at you, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Nietzsche was right. Dr. Malone, first of all, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate the work that you're doing in the world right now. We want to dive right into it and talk about some of the things that you're really spearheading in the information war space, and that being the main subject of fifth generational warfare. Can you kind of define what that is and how maybe that's operating in the world today, especially with regards to the West?
So 5GW or fifth generation warfare, to start off with, has nothing to do with cell towers. So we get that off the books now. It is a technical term that has been used in both the military and academia for quite a while now. I think well over a decade. And it really, the term fifth generation is a bit of a misnomer. You might better consider it a gradient of warfare, one of many. Fifth generation warfare is functionally the logical extension of warfare as propaganda. So it is kind of the complete propaganda campaign package. It doesn't involve typically kinetic weapons. It doesn't involve high intensity investments. It's classically leaderless. In other words, you cannot the person subjected to fifth generation warfare technology is not personally aware of who the leaders are or the main actors that are pushing that information into their media space, information space, thought space, emotion space. Fifth generation warfare is a battle to control minds and perceptions on an individual level. It is not a battle over territory. In contrast with prior examples of warfare, prior gradients, in that first generation warfare is basically organized top-down, run by a king or a general commander, involves swords, bows and arrows, battle lines, lances, that type of interaction. Second generation warfare, you can think of as the U.S. Civil War as a transition from first to second. And of course, World War I being the ultimate embodiment of second generation warfare, where you had mechanization, you had gunpowder-backed weaponry of high intensity and capability, but you still have primarily a top-down leadership structure, and the battle is over territory largely, not to say propaganda doesn't exist. Third generation warfare can be thought of as the German innovation of the Blitzkrieg and subsequently in World War II. One of the key innovations, and a case can be made that the German army at the time of the initial Blitzkrieg actually was technically inferior to the French defenses as deployed along the Maginot Line. But the French strategy was grounded in the experience of the First World War. And so it anticipated large troop movements, unified battle lines, that type of thing. And the German innovation was to delegate authority down to local commanders to allow them to adapt to local battlefield situations. And so you had this much, much more dynamic command structure that was able to rapidly adapt to battlefield conditions as opposed to having to rely on communication back to Central Command and then Central Command giving orders back to the field. So you can think of Rommel in his classic advantages in North Africa in his tank activities, where he's widely acknowledged as a brilliant commander and tactician. So that's third generation warfare. Fourth generation warfare is basically the asymmetric conflict strategies, which rely heavily on propaganda, but are, again, very focused on territory. The strategies deployed in asymmetric warfare by notoriously our opponents, the Viet Cong, Sandinistas, of course, the Taliban, and Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda provides a great example of the advantages of fourth generation warfare, which is really developed in order to counter having a dominant military and political opponent. And Al-Qaeda, as you know, particularly after Osama bin Laden was taken out, became incredibly decentralized. So that you just had a central kind of communication about overall strategy and then complete autonomy in terms of tactics. So just to be glib, the general strategy was kill Americans, and how you did it was up to you. So improvised explosive devices, assassinations, all kinds of strategies were deployed very effectively in an environment in which our intelligence and military communities couldn't readily identify who central leadership was to take it out. Of course, they would just send in a drone strike or whatever if they could do that. And so they were constantly faced with this problem of whack-a-mole, where they can't identify who is the commander-in-chief of this insurgency operation, and so they're unable to deploy kinetic weapons and other technologies to take those people out. Also, in fourth generation warfare, you'll note that it's very much has a propaganda and a psychological influencing component. And so the exploitation of religion and fundamentalist beliefs, et cetera, to convince the population that the insurgents represented something that was more like them, as opposed to the great devil in the West, the United States, with its democratic Christian traditions, as just one example of stereotypes. So in the face of the fact that the United States military has basically been defeated in every single fourth generation conflict it's encountered, particularly the Five Eyes Alliance, the intelligence community association that ties together Great Britain, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand in one of the most successful intelligence cooperative activities in modern history, has developed this PSYOPs or PSYWAR strategy involving the latest insights and technology regarding both conflict, such as the OODA loop, to enable rapid response based on basically intuition and gut feeling. And the full catalog of interventions that have been deployed in association with the internet, other media, etc. Again, with the goal being not to capture territory, but capture the minds and emotions of populations without them even being aware that they're being manipulated. And of course, this leads to the logic of the ends justify the means that we've seen deployed by our government throughout the COVID crisis. And we actually have had many, many documented examples of actual military units, such as the 77th Brigade in Great Britain, being deployed, that were military units that were developed for offshore PSYOPs or PSYWAR activities, fifth generation warfare activities, being deployed against their civilian populations, their own civilian populations. So I met one, just as an example, I met one former retired Army senior officer that at a rally last week for the Constitutional Party in St. Louis, who listened to my talk on fifth generation warfare and sovereignty, and became very animated at questioning, and then came up to me afterwards, said that this is where he had spent his entire professional life, but it had all been during the in PSYWAR units for the Army. That he told me that I'd got it exactly right, and that his huge disappointment was that this was largely developed for the Cold War purposes, this technology, and that what had happened was that there was this anticipated peace dividend that would accrue with the collapse of the Soviet Union. But instead, all of those resources and the military-industrial complex that was sustained by them was transformed to focus on, in particular, Middle Eastern conflict, foreign adventures. And then as those died out, that same apparatus was then deployed against the civilian population of the home state, much akin to the story of the Praetorian Guard in ancient Rome, where they basically, the Praetorian Guard ended up taking over through surrogates the administration of Rome, which is one metaphor of what's really happening with the intelligence community largely controlling the administrative state now, and together with its partners in the military-industrial complex. So I hope that gives you a brief overview. It's a talk that I give that takes about 45 minutes. I have some video clips that I use, one from Mickey Willis, and one from it's a recruitment video from a Fort Bragg brigade that grew out of the Ghost Army efforts during World War II. These are the people that came up with the kind of false flag, red herring operation in Europe that distracted the Nazis from Normandy by use of broadcasted, recorded sounds of armored movements in German forests and inflatable tanks and all kinds of other things. Ghost Army is what gave rise to that 800-soldier Fort Bragg unit. But there's also another PSYOPs unit on the West Coast that I think is affiliated with the Marines down by San Diego. And there's other PSYOPs units that are Navy-based. So basically, each of the major arms of the armed services has their own PSYOPs units.
I mean, you did a fantastic job of breaking down that 45-minute speech into just a few sentences. That does a lot. My question though is like, how, if all that is going on, that all that kind of high level warfare that you don't really see, or that the average person can't really see, how does the average person fight in that war? How do we fight back? Is it just not doing anything at all, or?
No, absolutely not. So one of the things about fifth generation warfare is it's low energy and it's very, very decentralized. So to battle on a fifth generation warfare battlescape, which by the way is surreal. Once you get into this and you start dealing with it and engaging in the internet and other media sources, you become aware that it is an extremely convoluted, tortured landscape where it's difficult to perceive truth. And it's very difficult to maintain your integrity and any sense of ethics, because it's a battlefield in which there's no distinction between combatants and civilians. So we all become combatants functionally. There's a statement that the only way to win in fifth generation warfare is not to play. It is extremely divisive and destructive because basically, if you engage in this environment, you have to recognize that you fundamentally can't trust anyone. Anyone can be subverted from any side, and there's a whole lot of strategies of used by agents of chaos or disruptors that will, for instance, infiltrate a movement and often ally themselves with a high-profile leader, and then work to undermine it within using things like bad jacketing, which is the accusation that others are controlled opposition or somehow working for the enemy. And these are usually deployed by people who either are actual controlled opposition or have been recruited in some way, even without their knowledge, to support agendas from controlled opposition. As you go through, for instance, we have put out many writings on our Substack that you can find about fifth gen warfare, and we are in the middle of writing a book about this, about Wars in the 21st century. But there's also a book from Michael Flynn, and then there's a book that you can find on Amazon, particularly in Kindle edition, is convenient and not very expensive. That is a compilation of a series of academic and military think tank papers relating to fifth generation warfare. There's also a number of resources on the internet because fifth gen warfare is very much a economic threat to businesses, particularly large businesses, because it's, in a sense, you could think of it as marketing taken to the next level. So these strategies of manipulating social media, the internet, bots and trolls, manipulating contacts, mining the web and people's data for insights that is constantly going on, is all a key part of modern marketing. And then the action item deployment aspect, the feedback loop, where you're manipulating the desires of the consumer directly, it absolutely relies on fifth generation warfare technology. So as individuals on this battlefield, on this battle plane, unless you want to find your own gulch and just retire from the world, you're all being subjected to it. And so you might as well learn it. Mm-hmm. And once you learn the strategies and tactics, just like with marketing, just to give the example, we're actually highly resistant to modern marketing. It's hard to sell us a hamburger. The subliminal messaging about sex or whatever it is that they're using to sell hamburgers or the jab, because it's all the same stuff. It's all the same technology. It's all the same psychology that's being deployed. It's just all of that taken to the next level and organized as a military strategy. But once you learn these things, and if you start engaging in that battlefield, which basically we all do, anytime you go on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or, fill in the blank, which, by the way, almost all these applications have strong components of involvement with the intelligence community, if not having been developed outright by the intelligence community, deployed as weapons.
Yeah.
So one of my titles is "Twitter is a weapon, not a business," which is absolutely the case. And I think Elon Musk is coming to terms with that. Profitability is a bit of a challenge, but its ability to influence minds is amazing.
I mean, the Twitter files that just came out, that just proved
Twitter
your
files
point.
show it the lockdown files in the UK, the Twitter files here, the disclosures from I'm suddenly blanking.
Was it Facebook?
No,
those?
I'm thinking of in DC, uh, the there's a legal group. I'm sorry, it'll come back to me in 5 minutes probably.
No, that's all
No
right.
worries. I have a question
eh,
for you though, if I could change
Yeah.
the topic just slightly. So we did a video on kind of on how the WEF is operating right now,
Yeah.
and we think a lot of this kind of war, psychological, operations going on right now is kind of muddying the waters to make people maybe somewhat atomize and not rise up against such a totalitarian structure.
Intentionally, right? That's the
Intentionally.
goal.
And so, and you laid out exactly how, like, the things that we think are the way to fight against the WEF are building communities, obviously getting in touch with like your own food sources and like the very basics of, life itself. But when you try to form things like that, things like backjacketing happen and all kinds of different ways to subvert the individual from forming structures outside of the global top-down totalitarian structure.
The Mickey Willis piece that I show as part of my lecture that I think is called Our Legacy, speaks to this and speaks to the intentional efforts to shatter communities.
Right.
Exactly the reason you're talking about.
Yeah. So basically, we think that the best way, or like the future worth pursuing, is to exit and build, because there's the top down, Tower of Babel that we're creating with the WEF there's no hope for it essentially. Do you think? But I hold out hope there. Like, do you think these institutions are savable? Should we fight that battle, or should we exit and build parallel structures, like I mentioned earlier?
Personally, I think that parallel structure is the way to go. And I talk about that in the book, in that last third of the book where I'm talking about solutions, the better way forward. I think that this has been going on and been in the planning and implementation stage now for decades, and it is well and thoroughly embedded. The WEF created the G12. The WEF it basically now functions as a pseudo world government. It is absolutely corporatist. It uses these propaganda techniques to gin up support for agendas that, on the surface, and even as you look into them, scientifically they're unsound. The logic around climate disruption and the role of CO2 in that is forbidden to be discussed, but does not withstand scientific scrutiny. And it's not tracking along a lot of the lines of the predictions, and increasingly it's starting to fall apart. But here's the thing: when they promote these agendas, whether it's transhumanism or transsexualism or the climate change agenda, the infectious disease agendas, etc., what you see again and again is large corporate interests pushing an agenda and simultaneously offering solutions for the crisis that they are pushing.
Right.
So what you see, so it all appears, if you take a step back and look at it, it all appears as if what we're having is a series of synthetic crises that are built around business opportunities, so that they're offering, on one hand, the propaganda about the crisis, the fear porn, and on the other hand, their version of the solution they're selling to us at the same time from this consortium of the 1,000 largest corporations in the world, which is basically a trade organization. And so I don't think we have any other option other than exit stage left or stage right, as you mentioned, and try to enable intentional community pods that somehow are able to interact and transact business, because a lot of this does come down to economics and to business transactions. And of course, as soon as you go there, then you have as soon as you go to intentional communities, you confront a whole cluster of problems, such as medical care provision, et cetera. And one of the most thorny of those is trade, long-distance trade. You can use bartering within a small intentional community, like, say, an Amish community centered around a church. But you soon, as scale increases, you soon exceed your ability to support the economic development through straight-on barter transactions. And so you find yourself needing some sort of a token that you can exchange in lieu of goods and services. And that's, of course, the leading candidate for that right now is decentralized blockchain-protected cybercurrency solutions. And, of course, no surprise, the forces and entities that are seeking to profit in so many ways from these crises that they create really don't like that solution, and they would greatly prefer a central bank digital currency that ties all the way up to the Bank of International Settlements. And they seem to be very actively promoting that, as the petrodollar is self-destructing right now in the face of the BRICS consortium. So we have the food chain. If you're an intentional community, how do you ensure your food supply and storage? How do you ensure medical care? How do you provide for your weak and elderly? How do you create a sustainable community? And you find yourself going back to kind of ground zero, or at a minimum, kind of back to the early 1700s, where you find in the American tradition communities that have solved those problems, and we can look back at them. Obviously, slavery is not an option, but not all those communities relied on slavery or indentured servitude. And I argue that actually a surrogate version of indentured servitude is what many of us, if not most of us, have put ourselves into through these surreptitious threads of the banking system and the loan system. We all functionally become indentured servants. And that's illustrated by, for instance, the American physicians, just as one example, in the face of the COVID crisis, that were so compromised financially that very few of them, except for the more elderly, near retirement age ones, and the ones that were already on the fringe, like integrative medicine, the rest of them were faced with a put up or shut up, put up and shut up, or go broke situation. And because they carry so much debt burden, because that debt is forced onto them as part of their education, which, by the way, is not the case in many emerging economy offshore countries like India, which is why the preferred pathway that's now increasingly populating our American physician base is those that have received subsidized medical training offshore, then come and do a residency here in the United States and get American certification. And then they don't carry that debt burden, and they can effectively compete against locally trained physicians who are forced into these shackles of functionally indentured servitude. And that's just the way the game is played. I think that it's not paranoid to think that that's intentional.
100%.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
And so you've talked about kind of like indentured servitude, and then how we have the banking system, and then the school system kind of above that. And then we've talked about the WEF, and we've talked about the Five Eyes, and then there's like the 9 Eyes and the 14 Eyes after that. Who do you think, who is they? Like, is they the Five Eyes? Is they WEF? Who is propagating this? Is it just kind of all of them at the same time, just by happenstance? Who is they?
Because I remember you mentioned in your Stockholm speech that Daszak, Fauci, Schwab, these people are surrogates. Like there's somebody behind them that's propagating a message through them. And they're just the people that is the ones that's supposed to impose that onto you. So I know when we were looking deep into this, it looks pretty evil. I mean, to stare into the abyss and kind of see,
and the abyss stares back at you, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Nietzsche was right. Yeah, but it is true. It's hard not to get a little bit dissuaded, emotionally looking into this kind of stuff. But we think it's necessary to actually, even if you can't pinpoint somebody now, to you have to know who these people are that are propagating such a message on you if you wish to stop them, or at least understand where they're coming from.
So
right?
early on in the outbreak, we had the physician group that I tour with from time to time that goes under Physician Health Associates or Global COVID Summit. One of the earliest and most successful of the rallies was actually in Maui, Hawaii, because Hawaii was just destroyed economically by the lockdowns. Obviously, they're a tourist state. So there's a lot of anger in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And we went from Maui to Oahu, and I gave a rally in Oahu near Pearl Harbor, and we had a dinner afterwards in which there was a ex special forces person participating, and everybody had their chats. Children's Health people were there, and everybody's all feeling good and go for our side and all that. And the SOCOM guy got up and he said, "Look, who is your opponent? You absolutely must know specifically who your opponent is if you're going to come up with an effective battle strategy." And everybody kind of went and scratched their heads. And I think we're not too far beyond and scratching our heads in terms of who are the puppet masters. And there's a variety of theories. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal theory about this.
I'd love to hear it.
So those theories range from names that are so radioactive that if you even mention them, you're immediately labeled a anti-Semite. So that's would be the Rothschilds and various other large historic banking families. There's a version of the story keeping in mind that the Great Reset was not actually announced by Klaus Schwab. It was first announced by the current King Charles of England, former Prince of Wales. So there's a version of this that it's actually the puppet masters here is a collection of ancient European aristocracy that still controls, even though they're pushed out of power, they can still control political power. They still control massive amounts of wealth and assets, and that they're the puppet masters. There's the version of this that goes back to various secret societies and through time. As I mentioned, the banking families. There's the version of this that the U.S. intelligence community is actually the puppet masters here, as opposed to just being an operational arm of whoever those puppet masters are. There are as many versions of the puppet master storyline as I think there are conspiracy theorists. Here's my version, and it relies on a Venn diagram. And when I put it out, I spent so much time thinking about it. I put it out as a Substack because I get these questions all the time. And because I put it out as a Venn diagram, most of the comments that I got in social media ran along the lines of Kamala Harris loves Venn diagrams. So that was very deflating. So here it goes. Imagine a Venn diagram with three intersecting circles.
All right.
They have a common intersection. The upper circle is, I title, failure to think. Okay? And I chose that term because of Hannah Arendt's book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, in which she identifies the underlying cause of the evil, the banality of evil she spoke about, as embodied by Eichmann, who didn't come across in his trial as fundamentally evil. He was not a stereotype of an evil person, unlike, say, Klaus Schwab or Norbert Harari. He came across as basically an average bureaucrat seeking to advance his career, seeking to ingratiate himself with his supervisors and superiors in the Nazi chain of command, and in so doing, committed some of the worst atrocities of the 20th century. Akin to just as another example, the railroad workers that worked diligently to improve the efficiency of the railroads and the movement of, quote, cargo involved in shipping Jews from all over Europe, the concentration camps and the ovens. They were just doing their job as best as they could and wanted to make the trains work even better and more efficiently so they could ship more Jews because that was the deliverable. So the banality of evil, in that there's not some a nefarious actor with a mustache scheming, or classic Bond villain in the background, Spectre or whatever, manipulating these things, but rather functionally, a lot of the people involved in the operational aspect are basically unthinking bureaucrats that are trying to advance their career and do their job as they see it, and not questioning the bigger picture of what they're actually engaged in. Failure to think is a big bubble, and it has an aspect at the intersection of the others of banality of evil. The second major one that intersects with all of this is nefarious scheming. You cannot deny the existence of nefarious scheming. Yeah. And it's multifactorial. I mean, the financial community, whether they pre-planned this, as Ernst Wolf suggests, because they were facing yet another 07, 08, 06, 07, 08 financial crisis, and they needed some opportunity that they could use to justify this massive infusion of fiat currency to maintain liquidity, as they were facing a liquidity crisis. Whether they engineered it or they just exploited it once it had presented itself, or some combination of the two, there clearly has been nefarious scheming. All of the collusion between Jeremy Farrar and Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins using burner phones and denying that they had funded what now Bob Redfield testifies, and the documents support. Judicial Watch was the organization, I'm sorry, and Tom Fitton, I just remembered. And many of those are Judicial Watch FOIA gets. We now have clear documentation of the funding, as Bob Redfield testified, of this engineering of a pathogen, largely in North Carolina, by the way, and then apparently technology and components were transferred to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The funding came from State Department, USAID, which the secret is that USAID is functionally an arm of the CIA and the intelligence community, and the DoD, NHHS, and the State Department, another one with strong intelligence ties, were the ones that actually funded all this effort at Wuhan Institute of Virology and the preceding DASIC EcoHealth Alliance work. That, by the way, also included engineering MERS, not just SARS-1. It's a fascinating document that Judicial Watch has obtained. It's basically the proposal grantor contract and the following annual updates over a number of years that talk about what they actually achieved with that money, it is absolutely damning. So there has been nefarious intent. There has been collusion and scheming. The other one is the third large circle, I argue, is complex systems. We now have an integrated global world that is incredibly complex, and various players that are over on the nefarious scheming side, I would say, the likes of BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Bank of America, et cetera, that are busy. And by the way, BlackRock obtained its predominance in this because of operational decisions made during the financial crisis by Barack Obama and his administration. BlackRock and Larry Fink owe their existence as what they are right now to the Obama administration. Never forget that. Okay. That's when they came to power, because they were basically given the contract to disperse all of the fiat currency funds that were injected back into the economy. And as part of that, they were given authority to basically perform surveillance on where all those funds went, which meant we were able to capture computationally and algorithmically a huge amount of data on how the market works globally, right? Because everybody that wanted a piece of those funds had to basically surrender their data and allow tracking of all their transactions. So all that goes into BlackRock computers, and out of that comes predictive algorithms, the like of which the world's never seen before, which is what BlackRock leverages to generate their enormous, overwhelming power together with State Street, Vanguard, which they all own each other, right? So you really can't disentangle who's who.
Yeah.
You're all basically a great big sensation. So complex systems and emergent properties of complex systems. So this is the unintended consequences kind of thing. At the intersection of complex systems and the world of failure to think, you have what I argue is a bureaucratic, overbearing, arbitrary bureaucracy. Bureaucrats don't really think about what they're doing. They just see these complex interactions and they think they can just poke right here and intervene with some little discrete policy without really understanding the system and understanding how everything is cross-linked to everything else. And they get these cascades of impacts, which the intelligence community typically calls blowback. At the intersection of, in particular, the intersection of nefarious scheming and failure to think is another big area of unintended consequences or blowback. People that are engaged in these, whether we call them conspiracies or exploitation or opportunism or just call it free market or whatever you want to call it, they intervene and act for their own best interest and rarely think through the longer range complications of what they do. So that's the failure to think, and the intersection is unintended consequences. The intersection of nefarious scheming and complex systems, I argue, is called corruption. So the corrupting influence of the various nefarious schemers, which includes pharma, on particularly the overseers, the overlords, in a sense, of these complex systems, which involves governmental and large non-governmental or transnational bodies. So that's my picture, is that it's a complex interaction of multiple parts, at the core of all of which is the banality of evil. Absolutely, we have seen evil. We have seen the face of evil, whether you want to ascribe it to Lucifer or a secret society or pick your choice. Evil is evil, and I think most of us with our eyes open have perceived it, and most of us have felt the chilling effect of its icy fingers on our lives. So that's my version of this. It doesn't rely on secret societies or, multi-generational European wealth And that's not to say that those things don't exist and they haven't played a role. I would bin those under nefarious scheming.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, we want to be respectful of your time. And
Yeah. I think we gone over a little bit, so we'll let you go here. But man, you said that graph was on your Substack?
Yeah,
I'm super interested in that.
It's really easy to find, and it's got more explanation of the logic behind it and some references.
Great.
Well, with your blessing, we'd like to break that down into our doc, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely, no worries. I would be honored.
Awesome.
You know, that's the logic of Substack and the book, is not to assert proprietary ownership of ideas and observations, but rather distribute them into the environment for other thinkers to assess, work with, expand, reject, whatever. I'm not telling people what to think. I'm just saying, hey, look over there. There's that thing. Look over there. Oh my God, there's another one. And there's another one. I mean, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. I've had some journalists take shots at me that I'm not focused, and I ought to just be, like Bannon says, stay in your lane. This is a target-rich environment. Everywhere I turn, there's another thing to write about.
And it's infinite, for sure. It's infinite.
Yeah. On a final note, I will say I am very hopeful with the advent of Substack and Rumble and things like this. It almost seems like free speech is making a comeback. Places where the psyops aren't running mad. So it's a little
from
bit
your lips to God's ears. We'll see how that plays out over the next 18 months or so.
Yes, sir.
Some BlackRock has its tendrils. So here's a funny thing, fascinating. So in today's news, right? Breaking news. Yes. JP Sears would go. I need to tear up my tie and my coat.
Yeah.
So
good impression.
Tucker Carlson, right? Tucker Guest-Can.
Yeah,
I did an earlier hit about this. And the thesis was, it's because he's been so outspoken. I'm sorry, no. It's because there's on record him speaking to Laura Ingraham that the stuff that Fox was broadcasting about Dominion was bullshit. Okay? And he called it out and he talked about it, and that got Fox News. Okay?
Yeah.
And so you had this massive lawsuit by Dominion against Fox. Oh, it sounds like two very large corporations fighting. Okay? Both of them have about 20 to 30% ownership by, yes, BlackRock. Oh, it's BlackRock suing BlackRock. So you really got to wonder, is this all just kabuki theater for some other, is this all just fifth generation warfare? And the press repackages it and feeds it to us or jams it down our throat. And Tucker is left gobsmacked wondering what Mack truck hit him. But, he got my understanding is he got his full contract paid out.
Good.
That's $10 million a year for however long that was still going to go. And I know he was wanting to get out of that puppy anyhow, so it's kind of a win for Tucker too.
Yeah, honestly, he's better off for it. I think he's definitely going to go places for sure.
As I was saying at the start, in fifth generation warfare, the battleground is so surreal. Everything is twisty, turny, upside down and backwards. It's really hard to maintain your integrity, because everybody, the normal reaction is, they did it to me, I should do it to them.
Right. But then you're
and you immediately become the enemy.
Or you become what they want you to be, because they want you to have that state of mind, right? So it's like you almost have to take the higher path and we have some moral responsibility to pursue truth as well. And so I don't know if opting out really is the best strategy, although it might be, the easy. I don't know. I go back and forth on such things because
so months ago, I was sworn to secrecy, but it was many months ago that I knew that Bobby Kennedy was thinking hard about a run.
Yeah.
And a close colleague of his actually came to our farm and asked my opinion about this. And we went over the polling numbers that had been collected surreptitiously about this that shows that he's a crossover candidate and quite a strong one. Um, uh, and then I was asked my advice. Do you think Bobby should run? And my comment was, I don't think he has a choice.
Yeah.
I think he is morally bound that he has to run based on who he is.
Yeah.
Because things have gotten to such a bad point, and there are so few that have the ability to intervene in this situation. We talk all this hyperbole, it seems like hyperbole, about saving the nation and defending the Constitution, which, by the way, was another one of his topic themes, was defending the Constitution. But my opinion was that in the face of what we are encountering, the threat, what such a hype word, existential threat, we'll just call it a threat. The threat faced by the United States as a nation state is such that Bobby Kennedy, with his position, his family ties, and his personal commitment, passion of decades, really didn't have any choice but.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of mirrors. Remember, Matthias Desmet gave me this advice over a year ago, that once you start speaking out in the face of the mass formation process, if you don't you will be targeted. You will be attacked. That's inherent. That you are at risk for receiving violence. And you basically have no moral choice other than to continue to speak out. Because if you don't, the population will slide even deeper into the mass formation process, and they will get even crazier. And the only thing that will keep them from bottoming out and, doing mass executions akin to the French Revolution or Stalinist Russia is to continue speaking out in good faith, knowing that there's a high probability that you will pay a significant price for doing so. And that gets to the tree of liberty has to be watered by the blood of patriots.
And tyrants.
Metaphor. Yeah. Well, by tyrants, but that we also must defend liberty at our own expense.
Yeah.
If we're going to preserve it. And that's, I think, where we're at right now is we don't have any engaging in fifth generation warfare and cyber on the internet and otherwise is just incredibly unpleasant. And I don't think we have much choice for anybody that is awake and aware and person of conscience who cares about the future.
Yeah. And I also think we have an obligation to kind of share that info and help people wake up. A lot of people don't know,
Yeah, we have to do it gently.
Yeah.
Because doing it with hate in our hearts will absolutely guarantee that we will fail.
Definitely.
Yeah, and if I can say something about, it's the average person has an opportunity, really, and that's the best way to look at it because, with all the Psy wars going on and the fifth generational warfare and the top-down global structure of, the WEF evil knocking at your door, that it is not only a moral responsibility, but it's an opportunity for heroism at like the individual level across all members of society. So,
well put.
And
I like that.
We want to thank
you. You can choose to be a warrior or be a victim. It's your choice.